Good evening. My third time here. You all well behaved last time, I was pleased to see, and my son enjoyed his time here as well. And I was quite pleased by the way in which you seem to get on very well together. So let's just hope it continues. All right then. I don't need to tell you that we live in difficult times where in the world of politics, party lines are clearly drawn, each claiming the upper moral ground. And this is often reflected in the wider society, creating division. This month has seen the 80th anniversary of Germany's invasion of Poland and the start of World War II. At the heart of it was divisive politics, which set to belittle the other person. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus had a special word for those who sought to build bridges rather than to destroy them. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Not blessed are the cheesemakers, as was in Monty Python in the life of Brian. I hasten to add. See, I got it in. One of your roles is to find consensus for the common good as you debate. In so doing, you are building bridges and creating a peaceful environment where the citizens of this community can get on with their lives in harmony. You are the peacemakers. May you be blessed in your work. Let me pray for you. Almighty God, I pray your blessing on these good folk who seek to serve the people of this community. May they stand up for what is right, listen with respect to those who have differing points of view, be willing to change and bend and compromise if necessary. But at all times may they seek with a clear conscience to do what will build up and advance rather than to destroy and alienate. In the name of Jesus Christ I ask this. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Morrison, Councillor Wiggins, Councillor Turner and Councillor White. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting, please. Can we agree that they are a true record of what took place? Show of hands, please. Thank you. Declarations of interest, please. Are there any? No, thank you very much. Councillors, just wanted to bring to your attention that as you were leaving to come here this evening, you hopefully received an email. This evening, the Pride of Tendering Awards has launched. There's a limited time in which to make your nominations for the people that make the most good and do the best in your communities, and in some cases will have helped you to be in the position you are today. It's a fantastic evening. Please get your nominations in to the Member Support Office. I do hope you can then join us as well at the fabulous evening that we have in the new year. It's a wonderful opportunity for you to put forward someone in your community that's done fabulous things. I wanted to mention we had a lovely trip out into Harwich. I've been trying to put on some little outings for councillors to show us the wonderful district that we live in, and the next one is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. It's a trip out to Manningtree this time. So we've had one in Harwich and that was fantastic. So please do come along. This one's been pitched in the evening because I know some of us might not be able to make the day, so please do come along to that. In terms of leaving a legacy after the year in office, I have engaged a project with the primary schools with the support of the officers, and that is to give primary school children of ages or years 5 and 6 the opportunity to understand a little bit more about citizenship, cultural values, British values, etc. Having launched that last week, we've already had 7 schools that are interested in having that workshop delivered, so I shall be very busy on that front. The other thing I wanted to say, and just to re-emphasise, was that should any of you wish for me to help you in any way, shape or form in my year in office, whether it be with a litter pick, whether it be to come and visit one of your businesses, one of your care homes, anything like that, please do let me know. Thank you. Announcements by the Chief Executive, please.
I have none, thank you, Chairman.
Statements by the Leader of the Council, please.
Chairman, yes, I have four statements I want to make on four separate issues. Well, with your indulgence, Chairman, I'll take them all together, back to back, as it were, for speed and efficiency, and then take any questions that may arise afterwards. So the first one, Chairman, is on housing infrastructure. Members will be aware of the recent government announcement that £100 million from the Housing Infrastructure Fund will be spent in this district to support delivery of the Tendring Colchester Garden community. This is a spectacular achievement for the district and the largest single investment in Tendring for a generation or possibly forever. This funding will provide a link road between the A120 and the A133 and a rapid transit scheme to alleviate congestion in the area. Chairman, I've supported the Garden Communities project from the outset purely because of the infrastructure first approach. We have all seen far too many large new housing developments that have simply placed an unacceptable burden on existing infrastructure, causing misery for existing residents, as well as creating a new community that is fundamentally flawed from the outset. This Council, through its unanimous approval of Section 1 of the local plan, signalled its clear intent to government that we want to do things differently, and the timing of this announcement so soon after our decision is no coincidence. It demonstrates that the government is as determined as we are to see the success of garden communities. I would like to acknowledge the key role that Essex County Council played leading in the submission of the bid to government, as well as our other partners, Braintree and Colchester District Councils, and to thank the officers involved in securing this major transformational investment for Tendring. Chairman, my next statement is on Clacton Town Centre. I'm pleased to let members know that the Council's bid to the Government's High Street Futures Fund for Clacton Town Centre has also been successful. £150,000 has been allocated to the Council to assist in preparing a detailed business case as a bid for a significant grant funding next year, which could be in the region of £10 to £15 million. That is an excellent future prospect which we will work hard to achieve, but I know our residents and businesses want to see positive action now in order to tackle current problems as well as planning for the future. I'm therefore pleased that Cabinet on Friday will consider an ambitious vision and programme for change to position Clacton by 2030 as a thriving place for residents and visitors. Alongside this will be a plan of action which outlines short, medium and long-term interventions, along with £250,000 from the Council's regeneration budgets as a starting point for delivery. Short-term actions proposed, which could be carried out for any potential government funding, include improved access and more parking, creating a performance area in the town square, and groundwork for future schemes such as a commercial property study and a review of licensing policies. I would like to thank all those involved in developing the bid, including particularly the Clacton Town Centre Working Party, where partners and businesses came together to develop proposals aimed at ensuring a vibrant and successful future for Clacton. Chairman, waste and recycling. The rollout of the new waste service is a mammoth task. Other than council tax billing and the annual election canvass, waste is the only service which affects every single household in our district, and it therefore impacts upon every one of the nearly 150,000 people who live in Tendring. This operation has seen more than 58,000 new wheelie bins delivered to homes and completely new collection routes right across the district over a 10-week period. Planning has been going on for more than a year to ensure a smoother rollout as possible. This has included speaking to colleagues at other Essex councils who have been through a similar process, and their feedback has always been that this type of change can take up to 6 months to bed in. Councillor Talbot, the portfolio holder responsible for waste and recycling, will have more of an update in response to questions elsewhere on this agenda, and I wouldn't wish to steal too much of his thunder, but I do want to thank him for his dedication and commitment to ensuring that this has gone as smoothly as possible. I'm pleased to be able to say that over 98% of households received their new bins as planned. We know, however, that 1.72% of households did not, although the vast majority of these were delivered last week by our contractors during a planned mop-up period. We also recognise that there have been teething problems with waste collections during the rollout, And on behalf of Tendring District Council, I would like to apologise for that, and to apologise to any Tendring residents who have been inconvenienced in any way as the new waste collection system has been implemented. With an operation of this size and scale, some element of disruption was always going to be inevitable. And whilst the numbers are tiny as a percentage of the total population, I fully recognise that for the individuals concerned, it can be very annoying and irritating to have any issues at all with your bin collection service. So, as I say, I do apologise to anyone and everyone affected. The issues have mainly centred around new crews having to learn new routes and during the transition period running the old and new systems in parallel. We are continuing to work with Veolia to address these issues, but are already seeing the incidence of problems and complaints reducing dramatically now that we are wholly on the new system. Finally, we are also now seeing the evidence that the amounts and proportions of waste and recycling have been changing significantly as the rollout of the new system has been implemented, and this too has contributed to the challenge of bedding in the new arrangements. The news on that is very good, but I'll leave it for Councillor Talbot to cover later on. I would, though, at this stage like to thank our staff and our officers and those Veolia employees on the front line for the hard work that they are doing on our behalf and the commitment they are showing in dealing with any issues that have arisen during the rollout phase. And finally, Chairman, exercise Adler 4 taking place Monday the 16th of September. To the best of our knowledge, Chairman, exercise Adler 4 is the largest East Coast emergency planning training exercise taking place this year. It will be a live exercise involving real ships, real people and a huge range of emergency services, public services, businesses and voluntary organisations. It is being led by the Harwich Haven Authority and has been organised jointly with Tendring District Council. Without giving too much away, the emergency planning scenario involves a passenger ship in difficulties being evacuated at sea and a second vessel catching fire and docking at Harwich International Port. There will be about 100 live casualties to be brought ashore. A major incident will be declared and Tendring District Council's District Emergency Response Centre will be opened and will be coordinating all council activities. The following gives an indication of the event participation in terms of multi-agency partners' scope and size. Agencies who will play their part in the exercise include Her Majesty's Government with ministerial involvement, police, fire, ambulance, Harwich Haven Authority, Essex County Council, a wide range of voluntary organisations, Harwich International Port, Felixstowe Port, Greater Anglia Railways, the Border Force, Marine and Coast Guard Agency, ONRI Lifeboats, Public Health England. The list goes on, Chairman. This will be a major and invaluable exercise which will test our emergency planning arrangements in as near as possible a live situation. So I would like to take this opportunity to remind and reassure local residents not to be alarmed if they see this large-scale emergency services response around Harwich on September the 16th, as this is for the exercise. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank the leader for that report. I've just got a couple of questions on the first part of his report, which was on the major housing structure investment, which has been awarded to the three councils and across Essex. Can you tell me any idea of when that money will actually be in the bank? Or is it just an announcement which we're not going to see anything from? And is it just something that's been announced prior to an election? Can he tell me if any of that money is for existing infrastructure? Because I'm sure he will be as concerned as I am that all of the MPs and all councillors across Essex have been raising concerns about this future investment and future funding and being available for future housing developments. But if they'd have put the same energy into raising funds for the existing infrastructure which we're facing and our residents are facing on a daily basis, it would have been possibly more rewarding, because I'm hoping that this money has not been diverted from such as the A120, because we were waiting on a decision from the government under the next funding round for money, major investment of money being put forward for the A120, which is at the end of its life between Horsley Cross and Harwich. So my real concern is that the government's now moved funds from those proposed funds which could have upgraded that that roadway, which is absolutely in need of it, and put it forward for future housing need, which is not what existing residents want here now.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in my industry, infrastructure means the complete system. So it's good news that, and being an optimist, that we're going to get the roads and rapid transport systems. But infrastructure also includes, and I was just making a list as Neil was talking, it is the schools, doctors, clinics, police, firefighters, and all those infrastructure systems for our local as well as the new, our local existing residents as well as the new residents that are coming to this area.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Stock.
Okay. If I may take those in order. The money that we've got, the simple answer to your question, Councillor Anderson, I don't know exactly when we're going to be getting it. But that's the first question I asked. You're absolutely on the money. Obviously, if we had a sudden general election and change government, then maybe things would change. I don't know how likely that is to happen anytime soon. I completely share your feelings about the A120 and the urgency with which that road desperately needs to be upgraded. It's appalling that one of the country's major ports, in every story about Brexit and a no-deal Brexit and the fact Dover could be gridlocked, everyone talks the next port is Harwich. And the road into Harwich, with no disrespect to Harwich itself, is little better than a dirt track, frankly. It's appalling. And it's sort of 50 years overdue for an upgrade. This money hasn't come from highways, though. It has come from housing. And it is about the Housing Infrastructure Fund, as the name suggests. It's about unlocking land for housing, for future housing. So where they said, we could build loads of houses here if only there was a road into it or a railway station or something like that. And Essex was, as Ivan said, amazingly successful in getting more than half of the money that was announced. £600 million was announced on that day, 370 million coming to either Chelmsford or, frankly, to us. I think that they're separate issues, basically. We don't know exactly when we're going to be getting the money. I am quite confident in the conversations I've had, because it's the first question that I've asked, that this is a genuine, meaningful announcement. It's not an announcement of a future announcement of a future announcement. It's a definite going to happen. But we are looking at an imminent general election, and then who knows what happens. So I can't imagine, though, any government coming in is going to be wanting to not build houses. So the great strength of the Garden Communities project, it's not a party political issue. It's cross-party. We're all working together to make this happen, because houses have got to be built. And as I said in my statement, people are fed up seeing new developments go, and it's just put a burden on the infrastructure. So coming to Terry's really good question, about all the rest of the infrastructure, the community facilities, the education, doctor surgeries, hospitals, all of that stuff, that isn't being intended to be funded by this money. The whole point of the Golden Communities is that you get the land at cheaper than market value, and then that difference in value that you're getting it for, the cheaper price you're getting the land for, pays for the infrastructure. And I have said, and as have all the leaders around the table at these meetings about Garden Communities, that it has to be infrastructure first. We want the first building to go up on that site, not to be, one of 1,000 identical houses, but to be the school or the hospital or the doctor's surgery. And we're absolutely committed to that, which is why I'm very pleased about this announcement, because the government have been telling us that they're really committed to it. They are finally putting their money where their mouth is. When the money's actually transferred into the bank account, as Ivan's alluding to, I'll be even more confident. But we've got a firm announcement there, and I'm as confident as I can be that we'll get the money.
Thank you, Councillor Stock. Questions pursuant of members of the Cabinet? Councillor Porter.
Just a few words about the success of the air show. It went without a hitch, and I hope you all went to it, because it was lovely weather. And it really was a very successful air show. I'm going to have to lean over, I can't hear myself. Obviously, it was my first air show. I went down both days and the evening. Good idea, Mary. And it really was an excellent success. In the evening in particular, I thought that it really was very pleasant to see everybody having a very good time. I saw Councillor Stevenson down there in the evening as well, having a beer. And yeah, it was a great success, but of course that comes from the amount of work the officers put in, because it is an enormous amount of work to get that air show running. So I can only say thank you to all the officers that did all the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Calver.
Thank you, Chair. May I add to that and say it clearly was a very successful air show, and many congratulations to all of your team for a tremendous success. I'm sorry if I'm out of order here, but I just feel I've got to go down this route. May I say that whilst the air show was a tremendous success, we haven't had a fully successful summer on Clacton Seafront. And would you, as portfolio holder, join me in asking our chairman if he would now conduct a minute's silence to reflect the loss of life that has occurred?
Thank you, Councillor Calver. I agree wholeheartedly with your sentiments, and we will proceed with a minute's silence. Item number 8 is petitions to council. There are none. Item number 9, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10. We have a question from Mr. Howard. Please come forward, Mr. Howard. Ready when you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the portfolio holder for the environment and open spaces should be aware, there is a high level of discontent amongst the residents of Tendring regarding the collection of refuse, recycling and garden waste. Since the recent service changes, the service provided by Veolia on behalf of the Tendring District Council has been nothing short of shambolic, and implementing penalty charges would seem in order, as would a public acknowledgement of the problems and the implementation of an appropriate action plan to bring the service back on track. In the case of the garden waste collection service, this is an add-on paid-for service, equating to a service charge of £2 per contracted collection. Where these collections have been repeatedly missed, the council is in breach of its contract with its residents for this paid-for service, and the council should be refunding residents pro rata for the missed collections and services not rendered. Please will the portfolio holder advise what action he is taking regarding the above. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Tom. There's a lot more I'd like to say in answer, but I'm trying to keep within the 3 minutes. The new waste and recycling service was rolled out over a 10-week period, which finished on the 16th of August. During this period, over 58,000 wheelie bins have been delivered to properties across the district by our contractors Jet, with properties receiving their bin going live on the new service the following week. For the vast majority of households, this initial phase of receiving their bin went without incident, with the bin delivered on the prescribed week as advertised on the council website, along with the collection calendar and a food caddy liner, with the missed bin delivery list running at just under 1,000 bins. These missed bins were mostly redelivered during the initial 10 weeks. Additional to this, the contractors were back for the week 2nd to 6th of September, mopping up the last of the reported missed bin deliveries. With any service change of this magnitude, disruption is unfortunately to be expected. Prior to the commencement of the new service, officers spoke to Colchester, Malden, Harlow and other authorities in Essex, all of whom have undergone service changes. And the feedback from them all is that it can take up to 6 months for a new service to properly bed in. And as such, we thank the residents of Tendring for their patience and collection service. The new service, which is in its entirety, has only been fully live to all residents for 3 weeks. That will substantially improve our recycling percentage figures. This is a testament to the service that is of delivering what we hope for and for which the residents of Tendring must take praise in embracing the new service and participating in recycling and waste minimisation. You ask, sir, what action I'm taking regarding the detail contained in your question. Among other things, I can say that now the bin delivery has been completed, my officers have used the staff who accompanied the bin delivery vehicles to form a second small hit squad to investigate and solve problems as they arise. In relation to garden waste miscollections, like all collection services, we urge the customers to contact the council or the contractor in the first instance to report a miscollection. There has been a period when residents have needed to call a number of times, but our aim is that once notified, we will then endeavour to collect the miscollection in a timely manner, which is normally in the same week for garden waste, so still provides the customers with 25 collections over the year. Whilst I can't comment on specifics, where there are cases of continued miscollections which result in the householder not receiving their full 25 collections, officers from the waste team will investigate further and take any action which they feel appropriate based on the information provided by both the householder and Veolia.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. We have Mr. James Burfoot, please.
Okay, so during December 2014, the Council removed parts of the ornate cast iron lampposts situated along Clacton seafront. These structures were erected in 1912 and have been Grade 2 listed since July the 4th, 1986. Naturally, due to this history, they form an important part of Clacton's heritage. A media article dated the 24th of December 2014 states these parts were removed on grounds of health and safety. The Council, of course, has a duty of care to ensure the property is safe. However, it can also be a criminal offence to carry out demolition or alteration works on listed buildings without obtaining prior permissions. When work is carried out on an emergency basis, this must be provided to be temporary and necessary. Within the article, Cabinet Member for Coastal Protection at the time of removal, Councillor Nick Turner, states, "We've dismantled these listed structures and will be restoring everything carefully until we can decide the best way forward to repair and restore them." I've recently made contact with Councillor Nick Turner through email correspondence, and despite him no longer having authority for this matter, I'd like to thank him for his efforts responding and forwarding my concerns to the Council. This is greatly appreciated. I assume that at the time of the removal, the Council complied with all relevant legislation and obtained all the necessary legal permissions and have indeed been stored carefully. We are fast approaching the 5th anniversary of these temporary emergency works. Therefore, could the Leader of the Council please explain the Council's plans to restore these lampposts either to a cosmetic or ideally fully working condition in order that these priceless features of our town's history can once again be a paramount role on the ongoing regeneration of our town centre and seafront?
Councillor Stock.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Burfoot, for your question. I'm advised that there is a total of 21 cast iron lamp columns along Clacton seafront. 4 lamp columns on the Western Promenade within the Seafront Gardens Conservation Area were refurbished as part of a heritage lottery scheme in 2000-2001 at a cost of £10,000 per column, and these columns need further work. Of the remaining columns, 15 are the Council's responsibility, and all have had their tops removed at various times over the past 25 years due to concerns over public safety. All action was taken in line with the advice of the Council's Planning Department. The removals were done on safety grounds and no criminal offence has been committed. A further 2 columns are within the pavilion site. The parts removed from columns along the Eastern Promenade in previous years were corroded and beyond repair, and the buried private cable supplying the electricity was no longer serviceable. In 2014, the remaining 5 lamp heads were removed from columns situated on the Western Promenade, and the aim at the time was to retain these in the hope of it being possible to reuse these parts in any future restoration. However, they were found to be suffering from severe corrosion and not considered fit for repair and reuse. They were stored within a council facility for a considerable time before eventual disposal. It would be possible to take moulds from the remaining lamp heads for a future restoration project should this be required, but based on the work carried out in 2001 and more recent inquiries with potential restorers, the cost of refurbishing the remaining lamp columns is likely to be anything from £300,000 to £600,000, depending on the extent of the refurbishment undertaken to the columns and the condition of underground cabling servicing them. I have just made a statement, Chairman, about exciting new plans being drawn up for Clacton Town Centre, and I would urge everyone to continue to engage with that process to ensure the best outcomes for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Burford. Thank you, Councillor Stock. Item number 10 is questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 11.2. Ivan, I believe you have a question.
Chairman, isn't it normal for the portfolio holder to read the question out for the recording first?
Yeah.
Councillor Henderson, the procedure we've adopted is that the councillor who asks the question reads out their question, and then the portfolio holder or leader who's responding reads out their response. Yeah.
So I probably could have said that, Councillor Henderson, but I got a bit confused in the moment.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask the portfolio holder for business and economic growth? Can I first say I welcome the fact that the leader of the council has appointed the portfolio holder for business and economic growth as the lead member on the UK leaving the EU. With the truly frightening prospect of the UK exiting the EU without a deal becoming a real possibility, I am confident that the portfolio holder for business and economic growth will have made it her top priority to ensure that a full and detailed risk assessment for the tendering district is in the case of a no-deal Brexit scenario is in place. Will she please advise members of the conclusions reached in her risk assessment as to how the tendering district would be impacted by a no-deal exit?
Councillor Newton, please.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank Councillor Henderson for this question and for his vote of confidence. I think we would like and all agree that it is essential that the Council has fully considered the implications of Brexit and in particular a no-deal scenario. Officers have and will continue to assess the risks and the opportunities which may arise, and this has been based on guidance from both government and local government association. This includes issues such as the EU settlement scheme, the role of key ports such as Harwich International, opportunities and challenges for business and the impacts on the Council itself. I would like to highlight 2 specific key risks and actions that have been taken. Firstly, the Council has the role to provide environmental health services for import and export, mostly in relation to Harwich International Port. Steps are being taken to ensure that the right level of systems, facilities and staff capacity will be in place to ensure service continuity post-Brexit and in particular a no-deal scenario. Secondly, working as part of the Essex Resilience Forum, officers have ensured that plans are in place to mitigate potential road congestion to the A120, should Harwich International Port have an increase in freight traffic, either through natural growth or through a natural resilience port for Dover. Through the Resilience Forum, the Council has played a lead role in a range of emergency planning scenarios which stress test the scenarios which could take place in our district and Essex as a result of a no-deal Brexit. This includes the provision of mutual aid and support from neighbouring councils. To support these and other actions, the Government has provided funding to the Council. Central to managing risks in relation to Brexit in engaging effectively in order to understand and assess the current position across key issues. The Chief Executive and senior officers are actively engaged in national and regional groups, and this ensures that the Council is both receiving and providing the most up-to-date information relative to tendering. The Council is also in regular dialogue with businesses and community groups across the district to gauge concerns and develop plans for support where appropriate. I am satisfied that the Council has and will continue to plan appropriately for Brexit. It is without doubt both a complex and extremely dynamic environment. And as the position comes clearer, I would be happy to provide further detail in written briefing for all members in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Calver. Councillor Henderson, did you have or require some form of clarification upon the answer you've just received? Please fire away.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Clarification. I seek clarification. The portfolio holder says that they've assessed the risk at Harwich International and about the extra freight. We know already there is extra freight coming into that port. Could you tell me how many increased freight bays there has been created at the port up to now, ready for any possible further increase in that traffic? Could she further clarify when she says about the Council taking on the responsibility of environmental health services for the import and export at the port, and they talk about the capacity of staff? Can she tell me how many members of staff we're looking at and what sort of facilities that we're actually looking at creating at that port to deal with those possible issues? And could she tell us, clarify where she says about receiving government funded? Can she tell us how much government funding that we have received and what that funding is going to be used for? And on the issue about regular dialogue with businesses, can she clarify how many local companies trade within Europe who are working within the district? And can she tell us how many of them rely on just-in-time deliveries? And further, can she clarify her own position on this issue? Does she believe that a no-deal exit
Councillor Henderson,
within Europe...
I think maybe one clarification upon the basis of the answer that was given would be quite acceptable, but there are now a series of clarifications which could be led to be seen as further questions which you could have asked the first time around. So,
Chairman, I'd like to point...
I hope you understand my point.
I do understand your point, and I'd like to refer you to the procedure rules and the email that I received from the officer, and it did not say anything about having a certain number of clarifications. It just says that you can only seek clarifications from the answer that has been supplied to me as a councillor, and I am doing just that. I am abiding by my procedure rules. Now, if you're going to then...
OK, Councillor Henderson, I'm happy with that, but it is eating into the 30-minute maximum time we have to get all these questions done, so you can base it around that.
I had one more, and it said, could the member give her own opinion as to whether she believes that a no-deal exit within Europe couldn't she clarify whether she believed it would have a major impact on local businesses that are residing in this district?
Councillor Newton, please.
Right, well, firstly, I'm sorry, but my brain's not clever enough to remember all of those questions, but I will answer what I can remember and certainly what you've said at the rest. And for the rest of it, if you'd like to give it to me in writing, I will ensure that I answer those questions for you. But as for what do I feel about a no-deal Brexit, as you well know, I believe in a no-deal Brexit because I actually believe that we are in a position as a nation to be able to go forward and trade with other areas in the world. I fully understand, having spent 50 years in the import-export business, that many companies are actually duty-bound and governed by quota. Those quotas would stop as and when we leave the EU. Does that give you a fair enough answer? And as for the ports, the port is actually owned by the Port of Felixstowe, and I am sure that the Port of Felixstowe will make it very well their business to ensure that both of their ports work well in the event of a no-deal Brexit. Thank you.
Question number 2 is from Councillor Calver, please.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, Councillor Joe Henderson will read my question on my behalf.
Thank you, Councillor Calver. That's fine.
When the Conservative group took control of the administration in 2009, it cancelled the plan to turn the Gashouse Creek site in Harwich into a public car park and removed the earmarked funding. The reason given was that the site was needed as employment land to provide much needed jobs in the Harwich area. In the 10 years since, not one job has resulted from the change of policy on this site. Will the portfolio holder for corporate finance and governance please advise the Council of any plans he has for this site and when the residents of Harwich can expect it to benefit the local community?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank Councillor Carver for that question. In 2010, the Council was approached by a local business owner looking to expand his business, including the creation of new jobs, new commercial activity, and retaining diversity of use on the sea frontage. Interest was also expressed by Trinity House, whose operational base lays next door to it. After considering a range of options for the site, the Council invited bids for the land. 3 bids were received and the land was let part to Trinity House and part to the local engineering company. Trinity House continues to occupy the part of the site let to it, making it productive use and contributing to the safeguarding of local jobs in line with the decision made by the Council. Unfortunately, and despite expanding rapidly, the engineering company ran into difficulties in 2013, and on 20th of January, the Council moved in to take the site back following the announcement of the liquidation of the company. The Council invited bids once more for the available section of the land. 3 bids were received once again, and in June 2014, the administration decided to grant the lease to another engineering company, whose bids included proposals for offshore services and educational facilities. The lease of the new tenants included a break clause that the Council could end the lease in January 2016 if the proposed works and activities of the site were not complete. By October 2015, it was clear that the company had been delayed by various factors. Again, the Council considered the option for that part of the site and gave a 1-year extension to allow the company to make good its undertakings. In January 2017, it was clear that the company had not begun or got consent for any of the proposed works. An officer served a break notice to end the lease. Unfortunately, the company resisted the break notice and identified the legal technicality that made the break ineffective. The present situation is that around half of the site remains let to the private company, awaiting their action and business needs demands. The other half remains let to Trinity House and in productive use, supporting their work and ongoing base of their activities in Harwich. Both parts of the land are generating rental income in support of the Council's wider functions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Guglielmi. Councillor Calver, should I move on?
No.
No.
Can I please? May I thank the portfolio holder for that response? And myself, I believe I would like to ask a supplementary, but I would like through you to ask.
I believe you too.
I would like to ask you a question on council procedure rules through you to the monitoring officer, if I may, before I do so.
Please do.
The question I tabled was actually to the portfolio holder for business and economic growth, and it was decided apparently that because it was an issue regarding asset management, that Councillor Guglielmi should respond instead. You'll see from the question that what I actually asked was whether the portfolio holder for business and economic growth had any plans for the site and when we could see, or the people of Harwich could expect to see benefit from those plans. The question that has been answered has told me what has happened on the site over the last 10 years, which is not the question I tabled. So firstly, what I would like to ask is there anything in the council procedure rules that actually, in effect, make the response answer the question that has actually been tabled?
I look to my right.
In relation to responses that are given, it's covered by 11.6, which comes under the section questions by members. It simply says that the response and answer may take the form of a direct answer with reference to information that's published elsewhere, or if a reply cannot be given orally, a written answer may be given later to all members.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank the monitoring officer for that response. I do feel that's something that needs to be looked at, possibly by the Constitution Working Party. And as a result of that, can I also seek a ruling on procedure rule, I believe it's 11.7, about supplementary questions, because the procedure rule clearly states that supplementary questions can only seek clarification on the response, but my problem is the response that I've been given has not been to the question I asked. So therefore, if I stick to that rule, procedure rule, I apologise, I'm actually going to be going further away from the subject that I'm seeking to ask a question on. May I have a ruling in how I proceed on that, please?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can I just refer you back to 11.7, as you quite rightly said, Councillor Calver, and it says after the response has been given to a question on notice. So I can only advise you, as in according to the Constitution, that your supplementary would be in response to the in response to the response you have had, and it's not a matter of us to rule about the whether you feel it's been answered or not. If you wish to take further on in terms of the question, I'm sure you could give a further written question into the portfolio holder.
No, I am now, I think, aren't I? Yeah. Thank you for that, in which case I would like to ask a supplementary. I'll test the water and see if I'm ruled out of order, Mr Chairman.
Sensible.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Councillor Guglielmi. As a supplementary, may I ask, have you discussed the question that I tabled with the portfolio holder for business and economic growth? And if you have, are either of you in a position to answer the question I actually tabled? Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, yes, we have discussed it. It is very much an asset management issue, and there is a lease that has been granted, and because of the technicality, the lease cannot be rescinded, and that's where we are. So we very much hope that the operator will come in with his proposed works and in due course. As things stand, the lease is in his favour, and that cannot be rescinded. Having said that, opening the site as a car park, that wouldn't have created a lot of jobs neither, would it? But at least we got half the site, which creates jobs through a very good partner of ours, Trinity House, and hopefully will be something positive very soon in the pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Calver, Councillor Guglielmi. We move on to Councillor Davidson.
Will the portfolio holder of the Environment and Open Spaces please confirm whether or not he advised the Cabinet colleagues at the decision to withdraw the weekly refuse collection service and replace it with a 2 weekly amount restricted service that would inevitably lead to a major increase of fly tipping within the tendering area?
Thank you for your question, which gives me the opportunity to expand on the overall discussion by the Cabinet prior to the revised service coming into operation. I did not advise the Cabinet colleagues that with a 2 weekly amount restricted service that this would inevitably lead to a major increase in fly tipping, because this would not have been true. But what I did say was that it would lead to a major increase in the recycling rate for tendering, which was very low, due largely to a former decision to collect virtually whatever a household chose to put out for collection in their black sacks destined eventually for landfill. With a 2 weekly collection cycle, I said that residents would not be able to put 14 days newspapers and magazines in their bin, or put cereal boxes and egg boxes, or put food waste, or put plastic bottles, tins and empty food cans in their wheelie bins, because there simply would not be enough room. Those residents who had always put these items of waste in their black sacks would have to start putting such items in a recycling box. This decision of the Cabinet proved so successful that the stock of 10,000 red and green boxes and the food caddies we held in anticipation of a sudden demand all went in the first 6 weeks of the 10-week period when the wheelie bins were being distributed around the district, a demand that we are now only just meeting. Dare I say it, I never dreamt that such a large number of residents did not even bother to recycle at all in the past. It's of note that we issued 30,000 sets of recycling boxes over the past 7 years of the old system, and now 10,000 boxes were collected by residents in 6 weeks. But on the bright side, it looked very good for tendering's recycling effort, expressed as a recycling percentage. Thank you, Bill.
Councillor Davison.
Yeah, can Councillor Talbot clarify whether or not the piles of black bags that are appearing all over tendering are deemed as fly tipping?
No, they're not. They're not deemed. What you're talking about is where people have put black bags out at the same time as they put out a wheelie bin, and they have no facility for that. We're not taking any side waste. Fly tipping is something that is specified, and that is quite typical. We keep very accurate records of it. In fact, you'll hear in part of my next answer to a question where I actually tell you what the figures for fly tipping are. But what you're talking about is not fly tipping, that's domestic waste that's still laying around somebody's house.
Count Ivan, might one like to let the lady go first, based on the time constraints we're under? Your wife? Are you all right with that? Joe, please.
No. Will the portfolio holder for the Environment and Open Spaces please provide the figures for both the number of operatives allocated to the ground maintenance team for the Harwich area in 2010 and the number of operatives allocated to the ground maintenance team for the Harwich area in 2019? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Henderson. I must admit this answer has been completely written by the staff in our Open Spaces department, and I've played very little part in it, but the answer to me was complete. The work of the Council's Open Space and Ground Maintenance team is carried out by a mix of permanent, casual and seasonal staff. The maintenance and improvement of public realm throughout the district of Tendring is the objective and responsibility of the whole team. Team members are moved around as work dictates. All grounds maintenance and open space staff are required to work in any area of the district. If team members are allocated to any specific area, it's to ensure service efficiencies in relation to travel and fuel costs, and not because they are and always will be fixed in that one particular area. In 2010, the general allocation of staff for Harwich was 5 permanent staff with casual and seasonal staff as required. Following the early retirement of one officer in the year 2011-12, the general allocation of permanent staff in Harwich was reduced to 4. However, additional permanent staff from elsewhere in the district, as well as additional casual and seasonal members were provided for Harwich to ensure that all the work required could be undertaken. The Open Space and Ground Maintenance team have been challenged this year by a shortage of available casual and seasonal staff at times when they were most needed, which has affected not only Harwich but all areas of the district in 2019. Preparations are in place to try and improve staff recruitment for 2020 and beyond. The Council is well aware of the special circumstances around Harwich towards the end of this year and throughout 2020. Plans which include additional financial resources as well as additional staff are currently being finalised to ensure that the public realm in Harwich not only matches the quality of previous years, but has improved and enhanced to show Harwich at its very best to the many visitors anticipated in 2020. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson. Yep. Should you so wish?
I wish. Thank the portfolio holder for part of the answer. Can the portfolio holder clarify why on the early retirement of an officer in 2011-12 this position was not filled? Surely it's become obvious that the department is not coping. Could he also clarify how many casual seasonal maintenance are the council short of to date? I was asking for numbers. Thank you. And could you also clarify my very last point? Whilst you acknowledge at the end of 2019-20 it's an important year with many visitors anticipated in Harwich, our residents who are obviously TDC council taxpayers, are having to put up with grass being left long and uncut, shrubs and trees not being trimmed, weeds being left untreated. Does he agree that this cannot continue? Thank you.
We come to an exciting juncture in the meeting. Now, a couple of those were additional questions. However, I'm prepared to squeeze in one more question off the agenda based on about a minute's time we have left for this section. So I'll leave it entirely in your hands, Councillor Talbot, to either answer those or we have one more last question.
Chairman, it's not my decision. I don't mind whatever is wanted. It might perhaps be fairer to not ignore, but to note Joe's question. And the fact is that 25% of our staff overall have been cut. So it's not surprising it went from 5 to 4. But that might be an answer. But rather than deal in detail with that, perhaps we could take the next question, Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Talbot, I probably should have said that you could, in fact, if not wanting to answer the questions, provide an answer after the meeting. Yes, Councillor Stock?
Yeah, I wanted to make a query, a point of procedure on this. We're in very new territory with these questions, the new way we do it, and I was going to appeal to you to be a little generous with the time and wonder if you could exercise your discretion as Chairman to perhaps give another 15 minutes to this section, just so people don't feel disenfranchised by not being able to ask questions they put on notice. But in future, Chairman, clearly if we're going to stick to a 30-minute slot, given that the questions have to be put on notice and the answers now have to be given in advance of the meeting, could we not take the question and answers as read, as printed, and then just deal with the supplementary bits on the night? And that way the 30 minutes could be more meaningful. I mean, I'm not proposing that as an actual amendment, but I think going forward, if we're trying to get all the questions into 30 minutes, that might be a better way of doing it. But I'm quite relaxed, Chairman. If you saw fit tonight to be a bit relaxed about the timing on the 30 minutes, just for tonight only, I'm happy that I wouldn't have a problem with that.
I think that's a very sensible suggestion, Councillor Stock, and I'm always eager to hear people. I'm often dictated to by elsewhere in the room, so I'm just trying to stick to some of the rules that we make ourselves when we have these work parties and constitution work parties and we change things. However, yes, I'm happy to hear further questions for another 10 to 15 minutes. Councillor Henderson?
So would it be possible to have my supplementary, at least one of them, which was a personal question to Councillor Talbot, answered?
Which one in particular?
Well, I can read it again, which is obviously going to take up more time, but it was the very last one. Could he clarify, whilst he acknowledged that at the end of 2019/2020, it is an important year with many visitors anticipated in Harwich, our residents, TDC council taxpayers, are having to put up with grass being left long and uncut, shrubs and trees not being trimmed, weeds being left untreated. Does he agree that this cannot continue? Thank you.
I must admit, I agree with Joy's comment, with the councillor's comments. It has got out of hand a little bit. We're trying to deal with it at the moment. We've applied staff to do it. We now have teams out spraying and doing the necessary in areas. But it has really been unacceptable, which is really what you're saying. It's a pity, but I think we've overcome that now and the work is being done. That's my answer.
Thank you, Councillor Talbot, and honourable of you to be so honest in your response. Councillor Henderson, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the portfolio holder for the environment, since the imposition of the amount restricted refuge collection policy on the residents of Tendron, the incidents of fly tipping have soared. Will the portfolio holder for environmental services please advise the council of how much fly tipping is costing the council taxpayers of Tendron District?
Thank you for the question. It clearly shows your concern for the amount of fly tipping in the district, where incidents on public land are the responsibility of my department. We keep very accurate statistics of incidents of fly tipping for reasons I'll explain in a minute, but I can inform Councillor Henderson that far from the amount of fly tipping increasing, the statistics show a continuing small reduction in this offence. In the year 2016, there were 1,477 incidents In the year 2017, there were 1,437 incidents. And in the year 2018, there were 1,326 incidents of fly tipping. So far in this year, 2019, there have been 723 incidents of fly tipping, and the good news for Councillor Henderson, for me as portfolio holder, and for the district is that if fly tipping continues for the remainder of this year at that same rate, we should be under last year's total, continuing the annual reduction in successive years. I referred earlier to accurate statistics on fly tipping, and the reason is that since the 31st of October 2016, the County Council agreed to compensate local authorities if an increase in fly tipping could be linked to the restricted use of their sites, now known as recycling centres for household waste. Tendering has suffered no financial increases. People and businesses should realise that fly tipping is a criminal offence, punishable by a fine of up to £50,000 or 12 months imprisonment if convicted in a magistrate's court. The offence can attract an unlimited fine and up to 5 years imprisonment if convicted in a Crown Court. There are also a number of other possible penalties, including fixed penalty notices and having the offending vehicle seized. The second part of your question concerns the cost of fly tipping. We have 2 hit teams who respond to matters such as fly tipping and issues such as litter picking along the A120, open spaces and housing estates, and with the cost of that team being £73,000 per year. It was always expected that the containment of residual waste in wheeled bins should in itself reduce the general level of litter compared with black sack collections, and along with the introduction of a second hit team would provide the council with flexibility to react to general street cleaning issues, including fly tipping. Although the incident of fly tipping does not appear to have increased, as I mentioned earlier, the cost is met within this overall budget of $73,000, so no additional cost falls on local taxpayers. I accept that the incident of fly tipping may have an impact on how the hit team is deployed in its tasks, but it's managed within the overall workload and the associated budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Talbot.
Just a quick clarification, Chairman. I feel like saying, can I refer the member to the answer he gave a few minutes ago? And the question was about black bags, are they deemed as fly tipping? So could he clarify to me, if a black bag is not outside the resident's house who it belongs to, and it's somewhere else, perhaps on a street corner, or dumped in someone else's garden, or dumped up a lane, or dumped on the highway, is that classed as fly tipping or not?
It's classed as littering, and we don't class it as fly tipping. Fly tipping is a deliberate attempt on somebody's part, the fly tipping I understand anyway, to dispose of rubbish in such a way that they pay no cost for it. They don't go to an authorised business tip where they pay somebody by the weight of what they're tipping. They try and tip it down some farm lane or in a lay-by or something like that. That's nothing to do with somebody who has got a black sack that they've not had collected and have chose to leave it there, or perhaps to move it down the road. That's not the same. Let's deliberately go out of our way to mix up. Most of us would understand in English what we mean by fly tipping, and it certainly isn't the odd black sack that's left out by somebody who shouldn't have put it out in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Talbot. And we move on. Last but by no means least, numero 6, Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chairman. I was both amazed and disappointed at the last council meeting to hear the portfolio holder for the Environment's response to the question asked specifically about the number of fixed penalty notices for dog fouling issued by Tendring District Council for the area of Dovercourt, Bay, Seafront and Beach. May I ask the portfolio holder for the environment to advise the Council how many fixed penalty notices for dog fouling have been issued in 2019 across the entire Tendring District? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question, which I'm pleased to answer, which clearly is asked because you feel that the owners of dogs who don't pick up after their animal faces should be made to behave with respect for the community as a whole. At the last meeting, I replied that in respect to the specific question about Dovercourt Bay, Seafront and the beach area, no fixed penalty notices have been served. You say you were both amazed and disappointed with my answer. I can assure you that whilst you may have been disappointed with the answer, you should not be amazed to get a truthful answer. I would have continued by saying that no fixed penalty notices had been issued in the whole of tendering, but that wasn't the question then asked. Now the question is asked, and the truthful answer is none have been issued. I reported that we were working towards a new public space protection order detailed in the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014, making it an offence not to clean up dog mess in certain areas. Under these orders, a person who doesn't clean up after their dog may face an on-the-spot fine of up to £80 as a fixed penalty notice. If the person refuses to pay, they can be taken to the local magistrates' court for dog fouling offence and fined up to £1,000. Dog poo is the most unacceptable and offensive type of litter on our public areas. I've considered the engagement of a team of inspectors to follow around potential lawbreakers, to witness and photograph offences being committed so that evidence sufficient to serve FPNs could be obtained. But though investigated, we have not gone down that route. Thank you.
Councillor Fowler.
Technical fault. Okay, thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank the portfolio holder for his response, and I would like to ask Councillor Talbot what steps he will be taking to make sure enforcement is used. Thank you, Chairman.
It's one of those dreams you'd like to be able to do. You'd like to be able to enforce that, knowing that the regulations are there. But you have to remember that under current legislation, to serve a fixed penalty notice, you've got to have exactly the same evidence that you would need to go to a magistrate's court, because eventually, if the person who's been served with the FPN doesn't pay, then that is the logical next step. You take them to court. Now, getting that evidence, you've not only got to have... The ideal thing, of course, is a photograph. That certainly does something, and possibly even a confrontation with the individual that's done it, even perhaps inviting them to pick up their dog waste and take it away with them. It is something that needs dealing with. We think the new Public Service Act, when it comes into being, is going to make it a bit easier because it works in general terms rather than by specific bylaws for individual areas. But certainly we are concerned. It is something that we've spoken about a number of times. Councillor Henderson came, as I said before, to a meeting with us in the Environment Services to talk about the particular problems in Harwich and Dovercourt. That was some time ago now. But it is something that is receiving attention because everybody agrees, particularly in a holiday area, that there's nothing much worse than having a young child step or fall or whatever in something like that that he didn't expect on the beach. But what we are doing is trying to give it the best attention we can, but we're really going to rely on getting the new legislation through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Talbot. Well asked and well answered. We move on.
Mr. Chairman, could I am trying to be helpful when I raise this point of procedure rule under point procedure rule 7, and I know you are an impartial chairman, and hopefully you'll follow in the footsteps of Speaker Burko and be the backstop for the backbenchers within this chamber for the rest of the year. I'd like to raise an issue under Part 7, which is under Special Responsibility Allowance. And as I say, I'm trying to be helpful here. Members opposite, portfolio holders, have responsibility allowances paid to them to be able to come to this chamber and answer questions that we put and clarifications. It appears on this occasion that not one of the portfolio holders specifically, when questions were asked, didn't even take a note of those questions when they were asked. I just wondered if there's any procedures where we could offer some kind of training to these portfolio holders under the rules so they can understand what their responsibilities are, and that is to come to this chamber and answer questions to backbenchers.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson, for those points. We move on. We are on to point number 11, report of the Leader of the Council, urgent Cabinet or portfolio hold decisions. There are none on this occasion. Minutes of committees. Councillor Stock.
I'll move the minutes as put as Chairman on the agenda, pages 19 to 46. Thank you.
Can I have a show of hands for that, please? Councillor Allen.
It's the Community Leadership Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Chairman. It's just going on about the homeless and the state of our housing. Did the committee, while they were doing their deliberations, consider comments made with regard to rogue landlords? And did any of those comments bring up any solutions to how we could deal with them? Because rogue landlords are the ones that compound the misery that a lot of our tenants go through when the housing repairs. I'm not talking about council housing, because we have a good housing department I'm talking about. But
are you referring to a specific page, Councillor Allen? 42. Thank you. Councillor Scales.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Councillor Adams, for your question. But as far as I know, no, there was nothing about rogue landlords on there. Or no.
Well, Chairman, I'm very surprised. I mean, I would say that there's hundreds of our tenants are being put in a misery situation because of rogue landlords. These landlords get the full rent for the properties.
It's just a question about the minutes, Councillor Allen. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Chairman.
Excuse me, Councillor Miles. I do apologise.
Sorry, Councillor, if the place for the accuracy of minutes, if there is an issue about accuracy of minutes, then that would be to go to the next committee and be raised at the committee of the next committee in the approval of the minutes. Council is not approving those minutes. It is merely giving you the opportunity to ask a question around it. Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor Miles.
Well, I just wanted to draw my attention to this entire chamber, actually, that page 43, where I was very concerned, and I have been to see the senior officer and have logged a formal complaint that the portfolio holder on the evening tried to influence the committee and tried to impose a motion on us that we looked at an aspect of something that was quite, in my opinion, improper. I don't think that a portfolio holder should be allowed to influence or try and put their own view over. They're there to answer questions under scrutiny. I have reported it to the senior officer, and I've asked the senior officer to make
thank
this
you,
note.
Councillor Miles, for letting us in on that information.
But it's in the minutes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm being reminded that the same point that was made to Councillor Allen applies to your comments, Councillor Miles. Can we go to the vote, please, that we move the minutes en bloc? A show of hands, please. Any objections? No? Thank you. We move on. Point 13, we have motion to council. Councillor Fowler, please.
Thank you, Chairman. That this council recognises the anger, concern and inconvenience caused to the residents of Tendring District as a result of the introduction of the new refuse collection arrangements. That this council instigates a review of the issues arising from the new system and the manner of its introduction by the appropriate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, with the instruction that the committee reports its findings to the next ordinary meeting of the council. Thank you, Chairman.
Do we have a seconder, please?
Yes, Chairman, that will be me.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Fowler, back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman.
For an explanation, thank you. As to why it should be taken on the night, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I feel most certain that if not all members of this chamber have received one or more telephone calls, emails, letters of complaint from their residents with concerns regarding the council's new refuse collection arrangements. The new refuse collection arrangements have not been debated in this chamber, and I am sure fellow members on both sides of this chamber will welcome the opportunity to air their concerns, raise issues regarding the new arrangements. Therefore, I request this motion be debated this evening so as to give the Overview and Scrutiny Committee its views on the scope of its investigation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Councillor Stevenson, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. My reasons for hearing this tonight comes partly from the Constitution and it leads on to something else. Articles 2.03, roles and functions of all councillors. In its A, part 2, it says all councillors will represent their communities and bring their views into the council's decision-making process, i.e. become an advocate for their communities. Number 3, effectively represents the interests of their ward and of individual residents. And 4, responds to residents' inquiries and representations fairly and impartially and assist in the resolution of concerns and grievances. Well, that kind of leads on to the second part of the reason why I think we should be here. As a chairman who will be responsible for hearing this, I think it's right that all 48 members of this council give their views to the committees, the members sitting on the committee, so that we can have a look at the scope for the scrutiny of this committee and the issues around it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Talbot, would you like to make a statement? Or Councillor Stock, sorry.
Yeah, Chairman, if I can make a few observations in respect to whether this should be debated on the night. If I can raise a point of procedure at this point, which is Council Procedure 14F. It is absolutely explicit in the Council's constitution, no motion shall be submitted on a matter that relates to an item which, F, is included within the work programme of an Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I've got here that the work programme for the 17th of February, which is just 5 months away, the topic is scrutiny of the implementation of the new waste and recycling collection service. The detail is that emphasis should be on recycling performance data compared to expected data, waste minimisation and overall overview of the rollout of the service. So in other words, exactly what Councillor Fowler is basically asking for to be done is on the Overview and Scrutiny work programme, and the Constitution is absolutely explicit, no exceptions, that if something's already on there, we shouldn't be taking a motion on that. So I don't know how it's got onto the agenda. However, it is on the agenda, and I'm more than happy that we discuss it tonight, notwithstanding that, Chairman. So, yeah, let's crack on.
Well, I echo those thoughts. I'm happy to take the motion this evening. Councillor Fowler, you get to go again, should you so wish.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm sure, as I did say previously, there can't be many members in this chamber, and perhaps also here this evening in the public gallery, that have not known of personally or have witnessed some issues regarding the new refuse collection arrangements. Not only that, it's also been all over local media. It's been on social media as well. Without mentioning any names, I'm sure you know the leading social media feeds in streams of upset residents. I myself, as a ward councillor, I have received telephone calls, emails, letters of complaint. I even spent 2 days running about with a car full of recycling boxes. And there has been an awful lot of upset, even 2 elderly residents I've had in tears on the phone over dustbin bags left in the street and possibly rats and whatever else vermin in the area that might be attracted by it. So I believe that this really needs looking at, and I do believe that we need to debate this matter this evening in this chamber, and I thank you for that, Leader. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Miles.
Well, I would like to endorse what Councillor Fowler has said. I can tell you categorically, and it can be recorded, you can check emails that I've sent to the senior officer, numerous emails I've had to send to him, against my better judgment and against my wishes, because I have nothing but the highest respect and regard for most of the officers in this district council. And I don't doubt for 1 minute that the officers working in this department are working at a rate of knots, and I don't know how they're coping with it. However, there hasn't been a single day since the rollout of this incident when I haven't received at least 2, 3, 8, 9 complaints. And they include emails, they include telephone calls, but they actually include people knocking on my door too. And some of them, because I've failed to resolve them through the usual channels, I've had to email the head of, John Hamlet, who's been superb. He has been superb. He's pulled the stops out every single time. But it isn't on one occasion I've had to do it. I've had to do it on numerous occasions. And an example I'll give you is a block of flats up on the Naze, 24 flats, were told initially they were going to get wheelie bins. Then they were told, sorry, the wheelie bins had been redirected quite wrongly. So they all put their black bin bags out. Now, that's minimum of 24 bin bags. Could be as many as, 3 times 24, 70-odd black bin bags. Veola refused to take them because they should be in a wheelie bin. But these residents had never even been issued with a wheelie bin. And that took a couple of weeks to resolve. But it didn't happen once, I'm embarrassed to say. It happened again on the next collection, 2 weeks later. The very same thing. Refused to take the black bin bags. There's been some really ridiculous practice going on here, which is causing people considerable stress. Not least me, I have to say. I haven't been the most pleasant of people because of the number of daily incidents I've had reported to me. Whole streets being missed out. Not once, but again, repeatedly 2 weeks later, and another 2 weeks. And I have put some of this into emails to Mr. Hamlet, and I've apologised for the need to do so. And as I said, it's to his credit and to his staff's credit that it has been resolved. But I've made as many as 6 phone calls in 1 day to the department for all 6 phone calls to be cut off. So not even to be responded to, just cut off. So this is why it led to me having to send an email to an officer. That is just not acceptable. It is an appalling reflection on the district. And I'm proud of what this district does and its officers. And I feel that this particular rollout has been a huge disappointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Spot on the time there. Councillor Talbot.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to move an amendment to the motion. I think members have a copy of it in front of them. As far as I'm concerned, the first paragraph should be deleted and the second paragraph should read that this council notes that a review of the issues arising from the new waste and recycling collection system and the manner of its introduction is to be conducted by the Resources and Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee at their meeting on the 17th of February 2020 as part of that committee's work programme. The detailed results of such a review will be reported to the following council meeting as part of that ONS committee's minutes. Chairman, I just don't recognise the mover's anger, concern and inconvenience caused to residents of the tendering district. But I do recognise that there are a number of outstanding problems and my department are currently dealing with these. Colleagues, I'm moving this amendment since I think the motion is premature in calling for a meeting in advance of the planned meeting of the Resources and Services Committee to be held on the 17th of February to discuss the report on the new waste and recycling service, which only finished the scheme's introduction 3 weeks ago with the delivery of the last wheelie bins to scheduled properties. I think this motion is being moved only to create opportunity for some members to sound off about the service and the administration, hoping to score some political points, because they really want an examination, because if they really wanted an examination with the prospect of some perceived changes, they would be happy to wait for 6 months' working experience of the scheme that the Chairman, Mark Stevenson, has built in for his Resources and Service ONS Committee, so that his members can have before them 6 months' real facts to back any discussion they may have. I don't mind the motion's political intent. That's no problem at all with me, as we live in a political environment. But I do understand that nobody yet knows how successful the scheme will be. It is the greatest change in tendering, and it's 69,000 properties since the 1st of April 1974, when Harwich and Brightlingsea and Clacton and Frinton and Walton and the rural areas merged to become the Tendering District Council that now we all are honoured to serve. That's the last great move that's been made, and this is the first one that's involved everybody since then. A last word. For the week commencing the 19th of August, my officers with Veolia measured recycling for that week with the same week in 2018. The result was food waste recycling had increased by 96% compared with the same week last year. Plastics, tins and cans had increased by 61%. Increase 61% in one item of recycling. And more importantly, in many respects, the black sack waste that goes to landfill was reduced by 40%. 40% reduction. I rest my case, quite frankly, but I urge fellow councillors all round the council to dump this political motion and support the amendment as written and carry it forward as a substantive motion. I move.
Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Stock? Thank you very much. I've got Ivan next.
Thank you, Chairman, and I rise to support the original motion and oppose the amendment. And I find it really, really disgusting that my residents that have been contacting me over the last few weeks are being called political for actually daring to raise an issue that they are really concerned with day on, day in, day out, week in, week out, the same problems not being dealt with, and then they're being accused of being political by wanting us as councillors to raise that. It was raised by Councillor Mark Stevens earlier. It is our responsibility to come here and raise issues such as this on behalf of our residents. And to answer the question for the portfolio holder who's just made his speech, there's a theme tune which comes to mind. Things can only get better. They had to get better because under his watch, for the last, 8 years, as long as he's ever been portfolio holder, we've missed the targets on recycling. They actually moved the target upwards to see if we could still reach it. We still missed his recycling targets. For him to dare look at us and tell us here that we're being political by raising this tonight, because his failures in the past have led to where we are now with recycling and people not having those boxes, because he's done nothing to make sure that recycling increased over those years. He's failed in his portfolio. So you dare come here to this council chamber tonight and accuse us of being political and then raising a victory flag because you believe you've now achieved something after all these years of failure. You should have never, the member should have never been reappointed to that position, should have never been put in this position to take care of the responsibility of this major change in our waste contract. There should have been much more planning and strategy in place to make sure we dealt with these issues prior to the introduction of this scheme. The scheme was actually introduced later than it was supposed to be introduced. It should have been introduced much later to make sure that we had those plans and strategies in place. And then people wouldn't have gone through the misery that they're suffering right now. I've had the same people come to me week on, week out, saying that their black bags haven't been picked up. I've had the same people saying to me that Viola won't take their black bags when they haven't even got a wheelie bin to put them in. One person was seriously ill who came to me, tried to stop them down the road to come and pick his bag up. How dare you actually say that resident has been acting politically because he's raising concerns about a basic service that he deserves, a basic service that he pays council tax on a regular basis. So
right,
how
thank you,
dare
Councillor.
you use those examples of our residents are being political?
Thank you,
They're raising
Councillor
genuine
Henderson.
concerns
Thank you
that
very
they
much.
should do and should be
Thank you,
dealt
please.
with.
Thank you very much. He's only across the floor from you. There's no need to shout at him. I've got Paul Honeywood, Councillor Honeywood, next.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak to this, but as I watch things go on, I've been quite surprised. Firstly, I'm surprised that the motion is here because it's already on the work programme. So it would have been made more sense to bring it forward rather than try and put it on the work programme. Perhaps people don't read their paperwork, I don't know. Secondly, I'm also surprised that it's Labour that's bringing this motion. Think about what's being said here today. Firstly, we'll look at what our crews that are collecting this are faced with. They're faced with 58,000 wheelie bins, so we hear. We hear there's quite a few new crews out there. We learn that there's new routes out there. There's assisted pickups that have been there and new crews have got to learn them. We learnt how there are two systems operating at once during the changeover. And we've learnt that this system has only finished in 3 weeks ago. So what I'm saying is we're talking about looking at this and seeing what's happened. Don't you really think we should give those crews a chance to settle in before we actually start to examine this closely? I would have thought Labour would have been saying give the crews a chance, but they're not. They're trying to pull it forward. 6 months to settle in makes a lot of sense to me. It's what other councillors have said, and it's what I'm saying. So I can't support the motion, but I'm happy to support the amended motion. Let's give them a chance. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, what I'd like to just say is I do agree with Councillor Henderson. I've got it. I do believe there wasn't enough thought gone into the rolling out of the wheelie bin and the situation. Can somebody tell me what they believe is acceptable in the way that the rubbish, the black bags are picked up? I'm in a situation now where I get not one call, but I must get 50 calls a day. And the reason I'm getting calls a day is because I live in a village called Parkston. There are 50 bags that's been there for a week, not been picked up. There's a whole turning, the whole street that's not been picked up. What concerns me, these bags are all over the public paths. They're all over the pavements. Now, in our village, you've got a lot of old people and a lot of old people that use wheelchairs. They cannot get out of their houses because black bags are strewn all over the pavement. Do you think this is acceptable? Because I do not think it's acceptable at all. I think it is absolutely down disgusting. Not only that, I've got 3 emails saying to me that the bins will be cleared up tomorrow. And they're still not cleared up today. 3 emails from last Thursday. And you're telling me that this is running right? I can tell you now it's not.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Clifton.
I think I'll do this standing up thing. It seems to work. Yes, no, I'm supporting the motion tonight. I totally sort of buy the argument that if something is on a working party agenda, that it should be done then. However, on this particular topic, I think it is very important that we consider this as soon as possible, because the complaints I've been receiving by phone, by email, they're not from Joe Public. These are from some of the most vulnerable and infirm residents in our area. I'm talking about people who are visually impaired. I'm talking about people who have disabled children, whom one wheelie bin just isn't enough. And I've had a phone call from their father. Phone me, tell me because themselves they're too scared, they're too afraid, they don't know where to go, and they're telling me I'm their last option. And I've only received this today, and they're saying that, you know, one wheelie bin isn't enough. We've gone to the council, we've gone to Viola, and we get no response. And we end up with lots of black bags of stuff that cannot be recycled. It has to go to waste. So I will be supporting this opening motion because this needs to be decided now. This is affecting every single resident across our district, and it needs to be handled because, like I say, it is affecting some of the most vulnerable and infirm people that we have to look after, and they're who we're here to represent. And I do kind of find it sort of laughable that, you know, when the portfolio holder talks about recycling, he is constantly recycling the same literature he read to us last time. So, but this I will support in the first motion because this is very important to the most vulnerable people in our society, and they're the people who we're here for, to give a voice to, because they can't find or speak up for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clifton. I very much like that new approach to holding the microphone, very clear as well.
It's a lot easier than bending forward or leaning over. It's a lot better.
Like Thank you very much. Councillor Calver.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say I was absolutely appalled by Councillor Talbot's speech. I can only say that he is clearly out of touch, but also appears to be in total denial. He's saying that the first paragraph of the motion should go because he does not recognise it. He's saying that he does not recognise that there is anger, concern amongst residents. And yet the Leader of the Council tonight has seen fit to apologise to the residents of Tendring for the chaos that is occurring. Now, that was actually a brave move by Neil, and I applaud him for it. But if I was the Leader of the Council, I think I'd be very worried that a situation was so serious that he felt it necessary to apologise for it, and yet the portfolio holder that he has in place to deal with it doesn't recognise that there is anger or concern or a problem and wishes it removed from the motion to sanitise it because it doesn't make him look good. That is dreadful. On the specifics of waiting 6 months, a year, however long we wait, those bins are not going to get any bigger. They are not fit for purpose. They are resulting in piles of black bags all over the tendering district, which we're having to pay to collect. They're messy, they're being ripped open. We even had black bags all over Ramsey Road in Dovercourt Tollgate the other week, where they've been piled up at the side of the road and then moved. This is real. And I would really question whether the portfolio holder should remain in his position if he doesn't recognise there's a problem. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Calver. Councillor Porter.
Very interesting listening to everything that's going on tonight. Pull my trousers down. It may be that we finally have a Labour Party policy of getting rid of the excellent recycling that's going on at the moment. I'll put that back down and bend over, I think. And going back to having as many bins collected as possible and as little recycling as possible. Because that seems to be what you want. You're telling people here that they should be changing the system to go back and have bigger bins. I mean, what is that about? I don't even understand it, you know? We're going to a system where we're going to get more recycling, and you're trying to talk against it. It makes no sense at all. And if that is a Labour Party policy, well, it'll be the first policy that you've actually got. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm concerned, what I've seen is that the rubbish that is everywhere from the bin bags that have been outside people's houses has gone. The roads are nice and clean. That people are recycling considerably more, and we've got the statistics for that. So we know that it is happening. So, quite frankly, I don't really know what you're talking about, but I'll be supporting the amendment because the original motion is pointless. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Sorry for your technical issues with holding the microphone. On the right-hand side, we appear to have more of a problem than the left. Right, please could we have Chris Griffiths? But no, Mark Stevenson. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just want to address a few points that have come up so far. All good stuff. I've been taking notes for some of the more poignant points for the Scrutiny Committee. A couple of things I wanted to raise. When we set the committee work programme, the bin rollout hadn't been started. It was clear that once we had started, and my ward was one of the first wards to get up, and if you ask my lovely wife Gemma, it hasn't let up. In the whole 10, 12 weeks it's been going, we are still, even this week, we had to deal with 3 bin-related items. I don't mind, it's the part of the job. But when your house is on fire, you don't let it burn down before you get the hoses out. I don't think we should wait to the 17th of February. I'm not happy with the amendment basically forcing my committee to have that meeting on the 17th of February. I think that's a Scrutiny Chairman's decision, along with his committees, as to when he will have that. And to be quite frankly, had I known the problems we would face, it wouldn't be on the 17th of February. Somebody raised something about the new crews. Well, I hate to tell you this, but Veola got the contract in December. Can you explain to me why Veola decided it would be a really good idea to change all the routes for all their guys at the same time we're rolling out the black bins? They had 6 months to do that, and then they decide, just as we've got the black bins, we're going to change all the routes. Why couldn't you do that before? Now, I'm not having a go at the crews. They are some of the best people on the planet. They are putting up with absolute abuse and all sorts of behaviour from the public who are treating them extremely badly. For me, they're the salt of the earth. So, Chairman, I cannot support the amendment for the reasons stated, and I will have to go with the original motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got to be honest, I'm really not happy with either of these amendments. Although I have a lot of sympathy with Maria, I think it's far too early, and with the second amendment, I think that February is far too late. For those people that think it's political, no, these are real concerns by a proportion of our residents that are not happy with the bin collections because things are going wrong. You know, there's lots of people that are very, very unhappy at the rollout of this. In some areas, it's mixed. We have people that think it's the best thing that's ever happened. But there is a small section of our residents that are encountering problems, and when we encounter problems at a ward level, to be quite honest, the response, to put it right, has been dreadful. Some of it has taken over 6 weeks. We have one block of flats here in Martello Bay that had their first collection yesterday. Now, I do think that, we've got to be fair on this. If there are real residents' concerns, we can't write it off as being political. We can't write it people's, elderly people who have bins that are bigger than they are, that physically can't reach over the top, to put the black sack in is not political. Families where the bin, frankly, isn't big enough, despite all the recycling bins in the world, the family just can't fit all of their rubbish into a small bin. That's not political. That's real people experiencing problems. Phone calls that aren't answered at environmental services. A catalogue, not being able to contact everybody. Visits that aren't being done. People treated like they're a nuisance rather than a client that need help. That is not fair. I have to say that, again, it is mixed. There are some very, very good environmental people at services that have been very helpful in some issues. Some of the crews have been absolutely excellent. But quite frankly, we need to allocate more people on the telephones to try and sort these issues out so people with real concerns are sorted out. We cannot allow this to drag on, and we certainly can't allow this to drag on till February. So I would support Councillor Stevenson's motion of actually bringing this forward, probably to 3 months rather than 6. I would also suggest that we keep in the first paragraph of the original motion, because I think that gives an indication of the true feelings that are out there. And let's take the politics out of this. Let's sort it out for the residents, because what we want is a good bin collection that actually serves everybody, not making political statements, but let's get the job done for the benefit of our people.
Councillor, can I just clarify one thing? At the moment, you had a substantive motion which was put forward by Councillor Fowler. You've had an amendment which is put forward and seconded by Councillor Talbot. Your amendment, which you're debating on at the moment, is that this council notes that a review of the issues arising from the new waste and recycling collection system and the manner of its introduction is to be conducted by the Resources and Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee at their meeting on the 17th of February 2020. As part of that committee's work programme, the details results of such review will be reported to the following council meeting as part of that overview and scrutiny committee minutes. If you then wish to change, you need to vote on that one before you take a further amendment, if you so wish, because if that's passed, that becomes a substantive motion. If that fails, then you revert back to the original motion, which is Councillor Fowler's. Thank you.
Councillor Stock. Councillor Stock, you are actually next. You would reserve, yeah, sorry, Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Probably confusion with Councillor Scott and Councillor Stock again. I fully endorse what Councillor Griffiths is saying, because myself and Councillor Wiggins, my ward partner, have been inundated with calls from residents. What is concerning, though, is we had a list of assisted collections in the previous rounds and not in this lot of new routes. You would have thought the people that have assisted collections, they haven't moved. The routes have moved. So these people would have been on the list. So these new crews should have had the current list of assisted collections. There are elderly and disabled residents in my part of the world who didn't get their boxes collected, or they were just dumped on the side of the boundary and weren't taken back. So that's one issue I have. Last year, around about October, November time, at the Resources and Services Committee, I asked officers at the time, are we ready for this? And we were assured yes. I gave a list of items that I wanted for the officer to take back and perhaps initiate, like additional phone lines for additional calls. Tick, we had that done. Help maybe with broken down areas by ward, where councillors know their ward inside out, maybe be able to give assistance on with the officers. By the way, Councillor Scott, is there an area in your ward which might be an issue in terms of collection waste, wheelie bins and so on? What's really embarrassing, Chairman, is I was walking back to my home and I was stopped by some people asking for directions. And it was the Viola crew delivering bins. I was quite embarrassed really, because I said to the men, I'm sorry, I'm the district councillor here, and you're the man who should know. Well, they should know, surely. They should have had a map of my ward. They should have had maps of the areas where they're delivering bins and delivering brown wheelie bins. It's awfully embarrassing, and it's embarrassing for the crew to ask such things. There are areas in the rural areas, which is concerning to me. There are rurals in the rural areas of Great Bromley. There are roads in Great Bromley that are not receiving wheelie bins, saying that the dust cart can't go down these roads. But on the same token, they've got a brown wheelie bin for their green waste, where the same dust cart goes down there to collect the green rubbish from the brown wheelie bin. That doesn't make sense. So things need to overlap here. And it would have helped if some of my comments and other councillors on that Resources and Services Committee perhaps put things forward. There were good comments from Councillor Maurice Alexander on that committee, and Councillor Richard Everett on that committee last administration, who brought up some ideas for the rollout. And those ideas should have been put forward and then initiated upon. We may not have had this problem now, what we're experiencing. So please support the motions at hand. But if it does...
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
If it does go to a committee, I think, if you think about the rollout first, Chairman...
No time to think.
Just one...
No time to speak.
30 second. All I'm saying is, it started in June. June, July, August, September, October, November.
Thank you.
It should be November we look at this,
Thank
Chairman.
you so much, Gary. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm not putting forward any Labour policy. I'm putting forward my own, as this is an alliance of an opposition, and we're all supporting this original motion. And I could go into what's been collected, what ain't been collected, but to say wait for this for 5-6 months, then the conclusions have to go further. So we're up to nearly a year before something's said. But what you've got to remember is us councillors, as you know, we're at the coalface. Give it 3, 4, 5 months down, all the public are having a go at is us, because we're your face out there. It's all right, the councillors at the end of the telephone, but it's us that's going to get it in the face. I've only started on this, on this sort of point because of what's been said tonight. To say it's political, well, that was always a good get out, because if you wanted things to shut down, you'd say, it's political. But this is a serious matter, and it affects probably more than anything else that this council's done for many years. I think I can only remember one thing, is when they wanted to pick the beaches where dogs could go on Frinton, when I had burning crosses in my garden. But, that's Frinton. But getting back to this, what I must say is I won't go onto all the idiosyncrasies or all those, the minutiae of my bin ain't been collected, that's not been done, can you find out about my brown bin? What I want to talk about is the post collection. Because, all right, down in Frinton, we're all right. At the moment, it seems it's working kind of well. They're picking up the bins, because all the residents have been told, you must put the bin on the boundary of your property. And they're all doing it, all following suit. They pick up the bin, empty it. But what happens then? The bin gets left where it's left. So all I can say, if you go down the avenues, as an example, after a bin collection, all you see down the pavements are bins and boxes. Now, is that the policy, or do we have to look at that at a committee? Now, I don't want that to become custom and practice by all the workers thinking that's the way we can do it, because that's the way we've been doing it and no one said anything. That needs to be nipped in the bud now. And you say, well, it's the odd bin now and again. It's not. So there's loads of the big houses been converted to flats. So you get 5 bins all lined up on the boundary, mostly with the handles pointing out, all ready for the men to take. And what happens? They're put back on the pavement. And what time is that in the morning? Just after that, the kids have to come along to go to school. So they've got to walk round bins, sometimes in the road, to get round all the bins that are on the pavements. So this is the stuff we want to look at and make sure the policies and the procedures are put in place that they don't carry on. And I don't want that to happen 6 months, 9 months, a year's time. I want it put down now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to oppose this amendment most vehemently. I did raise the issue at the last council meeting on August the 6th and asked a question, and I got an answer which I was very unhappy with. The answer from Councillor Talbot was that he was satisfied with the strategy as it was then, and that was 4 weeks ago. And he said then that they would expect complaints and problems for over 12 months. Now, I'm pleased to hear that that expectation has gone down to 6 months tonight from both him and the council leader, but clearly it still is totally unsatisfactory. I've got a catalogue of incidents from Brightlingsea. We have daily emails. We have people who still haven't had their wheelie bins delivered. We've had a crew from Romford coming round asking residents where certain streets were. We've had several houses that had to wait 6 weeks for black bins to be collected with rats and vermin outside their flats. So I won't go into it too much, because I think Councillor Talbot has had a lot of emails from us on that. But what really concerns me is the overall strategy and planning behind this. You had years to do this. You had years to sit and plan this, and it fell apart within weeks. And I think you should be ashamed to stand there and say that you're proud of the recycling rates going up, which seem to have occurred more by default than design, because people had no choice. It didn't seem to be part of your planning or thought processes whatsoever. And I don't think we can wait longer for this to be reviewed. I'm on the committee that would review it, and I'd be more than happy to do it at the earliest opportunity. So I would oppose this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. We've got a limited time period, once again, to discuss this, 30 minutes. I've got about 7 more people, so let's try and get through those 7, but we might all just need to have a little bit less time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I've spoken once and I wasn't expecting to speak again. Having heard what's come from the opposition this evening, I feel...
Hold on a sec, Councillor Miles. Sorry to interject. I was advised you could speak, but...
Chairman, can I just clarify, if I may, Councillor Miles? Yes, Councillor Miles spoke, but she spoke before the amendment. She is now speaking to the amendment. She has already spoken on the substantive motion, not on the amendment, so therefore she is entitled to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chief Executive. But it's what I've heard from the opposition that's made me want to speak again. I don't know which motion I'm speaking on, I'll be quite frank with you, but I'm just happy to have my say. First of all, Councillor Talbot, I resent very much your reference to this being a political agenda, because it isn't. Let's make it absolutely clear. Secondly, from another Cabinet member, Councillor Honeywood, I really find it quite appalling that you turned this on its head tonight and referred to the crews being at fault, and why weren't we being more tolerant with the crews, right? This, I think I need to make clear that certainly from my perspective, I have nothing but praise for the crew's handling of things and our staff handling of things. I feel that leaders are responsible. It's the leadership that is to blame, that is failing the system, not the people actually doing the job. In fact, I'd go so far as to recommend that the Cabinet member and the HR committee and perhaps this full council rewards an honoraria to all the staff that have been involved in this, because their stress levels must be horrendous, and we do have a duty of care to our personnel. And to finally, if I may, on another response that you made, Councillor Talbot, you expressed absolute horror and implied, what a nonsense when somebody referred to black bin bags being, fly tipping. Well, I'm sorry. It may not have been classed as fly tipping in the past because there's never been any need to, because black bin bags were collected on a weekly basis. Now that our system is changed, we need to keep an open mind that there may very likely lead to fly tipping in future, because if people are not having their extra waste collected because they've put it into black bags, then, what are they going to do with it? Because not everybody is privileged and has the transport to take it down to the local tip, etc. What are they supposed to do with it? That is very likely to lead to fly tipping. And for us to keep a closed mind on this and not keep an open mind on it, we're asking for trouble down the road. So I just want to make those points clear. It's not political. There is no blame on the personnel. It is the leadership who are to blame, always. And really, I would really like to propose a real good honoraria to every single member of staff who have been involved in this chaos and stress, because if we're stressed, I'm jolly sure they are. Thank you.
Councillor Bush.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, well, having listened to it, the debate tonight and the responses from the portfolio holder for environment, I'm shocked and amazed. He quoted that 10th of August, I think, or after 10 weeks in August, the programme's fully live, and it's like 3 weeks ago. I got a bit confused with that, and bin deliveries were all delivered. Well, I can assure you, and Councillor Talbot knows this because I emailed him a number of times, and he's been apologetic. I've got addresses and postal codes in my ward that are not even on the council system. And they continually come to me and say, what's happening? Are we getting a bin? Are we getting a bag? They've come and collected bags on a Saturday. They don't know why. They're still collecting and recycling, but they're still not on the system. They're still not on the council system. And I can't answer them. So I can't see that this could be kicked down the road. Metaphorically speaking, kicking a can down the road. It needs to be addressed now. And if you're in any sort of contract business, you don't wait 6-7 months to review it, because that can be a little bit too late. You should continually review it, and setting up teams to do that. And on the point of recycling, when Councillor Talbot suggests only improvements in recycling, 61% plastic and cans, it probably could be a lot more than that. But what, again, we've seen, in my opinion, is that it was a knee-jerk reaction with cost pressures to change this whole recycling situation. And now people are transforming what they do to recycling, which is only being praised. We have boxes that are basically a metre squared. Now, when you look at plastic cans, tin cans, plastic bottles, and all the things that go into that, a family having a fortnight who's doing a good job in recycling is going to take more than one box. I think it's flawed. I think the strategy needs to be looked at immediately, because we should be having a wheelie bin for recycling and making certain cardboard goes in it, like most other areas do. Because at the moment, I'm seeing houses have got 4 recycling boxes stacked higher than a wheelie bin. They've got 2 bags of rubbish in a wheelie bin and 4 boxes are stacked next to recycling. That is ridiculous. And that's my point, and that's why I'm going to stick with the original motion.
Councillor J. Henderson.
Thank you. I'll try and be very short. I'd just like to say to Councillor Talbot that I won't be supporting anything he writes, because I don't believe anything he actually says. You don't leave problems to grow. You just deal with them. You don't let them get worse and worse, which is what they're doing. We've got Veolia's staff, through probably no fault of their own, are arguing with our residents, telling them they won't take their rubbish because we haven't, as a council, put things in place to stop this. It's just not right. It's stressing them. They're taking it out on us as councillors, and I don't think we should have to put up with that. You know, we're councillors to help them, but our problem isn't being solved. We can't get through on the phones. We're just as bad. You know, the residents say to us, we cannot get through. We can't talk to anybody. We've been having emails bouncing back. It needs dealing with now. These problems are still growing. You know, other areas collect glass and all plastics. We should be thinking about our landfill. We are still putting plastic into the land, which shouldn't be happening. Yes, there's a cost to it, but surely our planet is worth that cost. You know, children in schools are being taught about the environment and about how all plastic should go in. Other areas have wheelie bins that you can put paper, you can put plastic, you can put glass bottles. Not everybody has vehicles to get rid of glass. These bin bags that are being put out might be people that don't have cars, can't get their glass recycled. They take up an awful lot of room. It hasn't been thought of very well. It needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be reviewed soon.
Thank you. A question, really, before I vote. I'd like to know, is there any reason that Councillor Stevenson, as chair of the committee, cannot bring the issue forward on his work programme? I agree with some of Councillor Bush's comments that there should be continual review, and then with a further review on the 17th, as per Councillor Talbot's amended motion. We've all had complaints, and we've all got concerns over the responses, timed responses, and in the meantime, the rubbish still builds up. That doesn't stop. I've had as many questions about our lack of recycling, and many of the issues do seem that they're more than just settling in issues. I do agree with Councillor Griffiths that now is actually, I feel, too soon to have a major review, and it should be a continual process. So I'd like to see something that the committee, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, could perhaps do sooner. And I also think that February is too late to have a first review. So that's my question. Is there something that the committee chairman can do to pull that forward and then have the further review as per Councillor Talbot's amendment? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think this whole issue puts all of us as tendering district councillors in a bad light, really. I think to solve a problem, you have to first acknowledge that there is one. It would appear that we're in denial. So instead of the portfolio holder giving flowery answers to problems, he should take members' and residents' concerns seriously and move to resolve the problems in an effective and efficient manner, which I think I brought up at the last full council meeting. I also brought up at the last council meeting that there was more questions than answers. Well, there was 3 questions then. There's been 4 from members this time, 1 from a member of the public, and you've got a motion. You're in very big danger of reminding me of the saying, every dog has its day, maybe yours was yesterday.
Councillor Guglielmi. Carlo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I honestly wasn't going to speak this evening, but obviously your chaplain, his prayers didn't work, did they? You know, I think he was in the wrong meeting. If he's witnessed, I think he's gone, isn't he? He's not witnessed what's happened after he went, so maybe he should have stayed in. There is such thing in the Constitution, in our protocol and our members' relation to treat each other with respect. I've failed to see that tonight, Mr. Chairman. I think there's been so many personal attacks, and I wonder why they've all picked on Councillor Talbot. He's big enough and ugly enough to look after himself, but I wonder why they're picking on him, especially on him. All I've heard tonight has been accusation aimed at officers, accusation aimed at Viola, accusation aimed at all the work that the council, all the officers have done. We've had problems in our ward, of course we have. We get in touch with officers, and guess what? It gets resolved. It might take a couple of days or 3, and it gets resolved. That's available to all of you, to all of us. It's available, that service. Pick the phone up, speak to Paul, speak to Martin, speak to Ian. Any of them can actually go and resolve the problems. We've had the problems everywhere. In my business, Mr. Chairman, I had paper deliveries, and we also had post deliveries. Whenever you have new paper boys, whenever you have a new postman, you get a mistake made until they realise where the house that they go and deliver the letterbox is. You go row of houses, big long one next to the other is fine. But when you get the ones that you've got to go around the corner, you've got to go down the alley, and you've got to... That's what takes some time to bed in. I will support Councillor Talbot. This is on the work programme, and then that's when it's going to be scrutinised. If Councillor Stevenson, as the chairman of Review and Scrutiny, wishes to do something over and above what's in the work programme, that's his prerogative and that's his chairman of the committee. What we're voting tonight is for the motion not to take an instant review or council instruct the Review and Scrutiny to take a quick review. We're voting to stick to the work programme, and that's what I'll be voting for, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll try and be as brief as I can. I realise time is pressing, and I wouldn't want this out of order because there's no time left to vote on it. Yeah, there have been some unacceptably personal comments against Councillor Talbot, and I don't even know what to say about them, to be honest. They're just not appropriate. But, you know, I don't criticise everyone that side. There have been some really good comments made too. Yes, we're all recognising some of the serious issues and complaints and concerns that many residents have had across the district. I made my statement at the beginning of this meeting tonight on that very subject. I apologise to everyone that's been affected. I acknowledge that something like 1.7% of our residents didn't get their bins when they were supposed to, and that is a very small percentage, but it's an awful lot of people because it's such a large district with so many people living here. So we have all had the emails, the phone calls, the whatevers, and no one is pretending that didn't happen. But we have to ask ourselves, what question is it that we're trying to answer here tonight? We've had loads of discussion and debate about what people think about Michael Talbot and about individual instances and problems and challenges, most of which will be resolved in a few weeks' time. They're just teething problems and bedding in problems. I think actually I'll give credit to Councillor Allen. I think he was on the money. He was saying about the wheelie bins being left on pavements. I think he was talking about glass collection, or someone else mentioned about glass collection. We don't do glass collection at the moment. Is that something we should be doing in the future? That would help towards our recycling, but there's a cost to it because glass isn't worth much these days as a recycler. But maybe we could charge for it. We charge for our brown bins, as Tom knows. Good to see you, Tom. And that service works really well most of the time. Is there more we could do? Are there more things we could collect that we're not currently collecting? Someone said about not everyone has cars. People who do have cars don't necessarily want to put a load of smelly bottles in them to take to the nearest waste recycling thing. So the question is, what do we want to get out of this? We can all agree that there's been loads of teething problems, yes, but it's too early. It is definitely too early to know the impact. Councillor Miles, apologies, referred to the fact that there could be instances of fly tipping in the future, and that's the phrase used, in the future. It won't happen immediately. It will be a few months before that sort of thing, until it beds down, until we know where it's going. But the key point, as Councillor Fairley made, is that the chairman of the Resources and Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, who by our constitution is not a member of the administration, it's a member of the opposition, it's Councillor Stevenson, he has the power. He has the power as chairman of that committee to play with his work programmes, to move things around, to bring it forward, to set up a standing working group. I mean, I don't disagree that maybe we should have a permanent working party looking at this issue as an ongoing permanent basis. I'm not trying to hide from any level of scrutiny. I'm not trying to pretend that everything's been absolutely perfect and dreamlike in the rollout of this. No, of course it hasn't. But across Essex, the vast majority of people in Essex now have the same size wheelie bins that we've got. And yes, they all had, if you look at the press in those places, when they rolled out the wheelie bins, they all had problems for around about 6 months. And then as people got used to it, it died down and everything's fine. And they all manage now. Broadly speaking, they manage with that system. Chairman, I can see that my time is up. I'll shut up. I support Councillor Talbot and I support his amendment.
Councillor Fowler, we come back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have nothing further to say except other than to call for a name vote. Thank you.
Councillor Talbot, welcome back.
Thank you, Chairman. I think exactly my description of it being a political issue has been borne out by everything that's been said. It's political as far as I'm concerned, and I don't know if I'm strange, but all four of my questions and the motion have all come from Harwich and Dovercourt. Now, we know the political complexion there. Is what I'm saying wrong when I say it's politically inclined? Of course I'm not. It is. It's not the issue that's political, it was the motion that's political, that's all I'm saying. But quite frankly, I don't honestly think, although I know some people have said week in and week out they've been receiving complaints, we only finished delivering the bin 3 weeks ago, so it can only be one or other week in, week out. There haven't been enough weeks. Doesn't mean we know there's problems, we know there's issues to be discussed. That's why now we have the staff available, and our staff had to postpone their holidays until the 10 weeks were over. So the number of people answering phones and doing things in the office was greatly reduced after the 10-week delivery because staff were taking their leave they were entitled to. That was part of that. The issue is it needs a discussion and it needs the opportunity to examine, but that examination should be based on a reasonable experience, not just a few weeks. The idea of overview and scrutiny committees announcing in advance what their projected programme is so that we can plan things around what they're proposing to do. The overview and scrutiny committee planned the February meeting to deal with this. I don't see there's anything wrong in holding to that. That's a reasonable period of time, and that's all the amendment is seeking to do. It's not attempting to stifle any of the discussion that members have chosen to take part in any way. All it says, if we're going to have a serious discussion on it, then let that discussion be based on round about 6 months' experience by that time, instead of where we are now, just 3 or 4 weeks' experience. The amendment seeks really, apart from dismissing the first paragraph, the amendment seeks just to do the same thing, but to do it after a reasonable period of time to enable the committee to receive proper experience that's happened following the introduction of the system. I still move the amendment. I think the amendment should be carried, and I think that is a very sensible way forward, whereas rushing into this emotionally because of the actual distribution is an issue I do not support. Thank you.
Chairman, can I clarify something with Councillor Talbot, because he used the word first paragraph, but my understanding from his original, and I read out, was you are replacing the original motion with the 2 paragraphs on the paper saying amended motion. So the motion would be, and if this is incorrect, please tell me, but the motion would be that this council notes that a review of the issues arising from the new waste and recycling collection system and the manner of its introduction is to be conducted by the Resources and Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee at their meeting on the 17th of February 2020 as part of the committee's work programme. The detailed results of such a review will be reported to the following council meeting as part of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's minutes. So the first paragraph is the original motion you're replacing with that as I've read out. Is that clear for everybody, for members? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification, really. I just wanted to make sure that I've got this right in my head, and for other people we're concerned about too early, too late. Is this motion, sorry, this is to the monitor officer, is this motion with its meeting on the 17th of February binding to me as a chairman, so that I'm going to have to hold a meeting? And if so, can I propose a different date of the 11th of November? Thank you.
First of all, what Council needs to do is it needs to vote on the amendment as to whether it is carried or not. If the amendment is carried, it becomes the substantive motion. Then the substantive motion can be amended again, and we deal with the amendment as what we've just done. That's as far as I'm going to go at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. Am I going to, as Chairman of the Scrutiny Committee, be bound to have that meeting on the 17th of February if the amended motion goes through as is now? or will I still retain the right, as the Scrutiny Chairman, to move it? Thank you.
The wording of the amendment is that it says this council notes that there is a review. So the review work programme would still stand. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee are permitted to consider their work programme at every meeting, and they can move it around if they so wish to. That would be a decision of that Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This council, by the wording of this amendment, is not instructing the committee to do anything on a specific day other than noting the work programme is to carry on.
Thank the Monitor officer, that's what I thought.
Councillor Porter?
Can I just get clarification that basically we've just wasted all this time discussing this then, if this is, he can choose when it goes in anyway?
Yeah.
The Fowler's asked from
Councillor Fowler, did you request a named vote?
to stand. 11 people.
11 people, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Council. I will read out your name. Please say whether you're for, against or abstain. Please and be reminded that this is about the amendment as moved by Councillor Talbot, as I read out short while ago. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Allen. Councillor Amos. Councillor Barry. Councillor Bray.
For.
Councillor Broderick. Councillor Bush. Councillor Calver. Councillor Casey. Councillor Cawthron. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chittock. Councillor Clifton. Councillor Codling. Councillor Coley. Councillor Davidson. Councillor Davis. Councillor Fairley. Councillor Fowler. Councillor Griffiths. Councillor Carlo Guglielmi. Councillor Valerie Guglielmi. Councillor Harris. Councillor Ivan Henderson. Councillor Joe Henderson. Councillor Paul Honeywood. Councillor Sue Honeywood. Councillor King. Councillor Knowles. Councillor Land.
For.
Councillor McWilliams. Councillor Miles. Councillor Newton. Councillor Overton. Councillor Placey. Councillor Porter. Councillor Scott. Councillor Skills. Councillor Steady. Councillor Gemma Stevenson. Councillor Mark Stevenson. Councillor Stock. Councillor Talbot. And Councillor Winfield. Thank you. Council. The result of the vote was 23 for, 20 against, and therefore the amendment is carried and the amendment becomes the substantive motion. Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chairman. In that case, I would like to propose my own amendment. It's just on the last paragraph. I think we'll have to work the wording out as we go. The detailed result of it states a detailed result of such review will be reported to the following council meeting as part of the overview and scrutiny committee minutes. I need to change that back to that the committee reports its findings to the next ordinary meeting of the council. As we've already been proven tonight, we cannot comment on minutes unless it's just about their accuracy. Thank you.
Okay, Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to sort of just clarify that I got that right, as Councillor Stevenson was saying, that obviously sort of doing these on the hoof, we've had these before, we want to make sure we get the wording right. So, in terms of the substantive motion, which is Councillor Talbot's amended, which passed, so the whole of the first paragraph of Councillor Talbot's amended a motion is now the substantive motion. Councillor Stevenson is proposing that the second paragraph would just be the detailed results of such review will be reported to the following council meeting, full stop. You need a seconder, Councillor Stevenson.
Councillor Bush, you second that? Councillor Stock, did you wish to speak?
Chairman, I was going to say it's a really unnecessary motion, but it's so unnecessary that I'm not going to oppose it. In fact, I don't know if Councillor Talbot agrees or not, but he may be prepared to accept that as a... Yeah.
All I would say was I had no objection to that at all. It's just a different way of presenting it. Perhaps saying presented as part of the minutes is not really strong enough, and what's being proposed is a slightly better way of doing it, and I'm quite happy with that.
So, Chairman, if I may clarify, therefore, on that basis, therefore, the substantive motion is paragraph 1 of Councillor Talbot's the amended motion, and paragraph 2 is as I read out, as per Councillor Stevenson. That is your substantive motion, therefore. You are therefore voting on the substantive motion now. Thank you.
Ivan?
I would like to, just before we vote on this substantive motion, say a couple of words, and because there has been comments from the other side of the chamber there about us members making comments and suggestions about our officers. Not once, and I'd like them to check the records, not once have I ever complained about an officer. I've only ever, and I think most of my members on this side have only ever been in support of members, of officers for all the good work they do. I've worked alongside them and I know how hard they work and I know how professional they are. This is not about them. It's about a system that's been introduced, and it's a system that should have had more time and more planning and more strategy. It's a system that we should have seen some of these mistakes that could have come and hit us like they have, and we should have dealt with them and planned more before they come about. And just for a final comment, Chairman, it's just shown we were accused of being political. We've just seen a whip over the other side. Every member voted for your amendment. If that wasn't political, I don't know what was.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Right, we move to the substantive motion and the vote. All those in favour, please. Thank you, that's carried. Any against? 1. Any abstentions? 1 against. Thank you very much. Recommendations from Cabinet. There are none. Point 15 is reports submitted to the Council by overview and scrutiny. I'm told there are none. But there might be next time. Urgent matters for debate. None were brought to my attention by 12 o'clock today. I declare that's the end of the meeting. Thank you for your patience, thank you for your passion, and I wish you a safe travel home. Thank you.
Please be upstanding.